It was 1986, and life in the United States was a bit of a paradox. The country was in the midst of a technological boom, the rise of personal computers, and the era of big dreams. But I wasn't living those dreams. I was 27 years old, living in a modest apartment in the outskirts of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a city still recovering from the decline of its steel industry. The air always smelled faintly of burnt metal and factory dust, and the skyline was a mix of faded brick buildings and industrial plants that seemed to tell the story of a once great city struggling to reinvent itself. I had a job working as a clerk in a small office, handling paperwork and basic tasks. My paycheck barely covered rent and the essentials: food, gas for my beat-up car, a night out at the local bar with friends. My life was like many others, predictable, ordinary, and far from glamorous. I had no family wealth to fall back on, no network of rich friends to introduce me to exciting opportunities. My circle of friends was a group of people who, like me, were stuck in a rut, working jobs that didn't seem to get them anywhere. But that was okay. I had accepted that my future would be a series of quiet, modest steps, nothing more, nothing less. Then one day in December of 1986, everything changed. It was an unremarkable evening. I was on my way home from work, feeling particularly drained from the monotony of my daily grind, when I decided to stop by a corner store near my apartment. It was one of those small, family-owned shops where you could grab a loaf of bread, a gallon of milk, and a lottery ticket if you were feeling lucky. I had never really played the lottery before, but on a whim, I bought one that day. It cost me a couple of bucks, pocket change, and I didn't think much of it. The clerk gave me the ticket with the usual bored expression, and I slipped it into my wallet without giving it a second thought. Life went on as usual for the next few days. I didn't think about the ticket. I went to work, hung out with friends, complained about my dead-end job, and talked about things that didn't matter. But one afternoon, I heard on the radio that the winning numbers for the lottery were about to be announced. I pulled out my ticket, thinking I'd check it out just to see if I had maybe won a couple of bucks, like most people do. I didn't expect anything more. But as I looked at the numbers, my heart started racing. Every single number matched. I froze. I looked at the ticket again. No mistake. I had won the jackpot. A few $100,000, a fortune. It was an amount of money that was almost impossible to wrap my head around, considering my modest lifestyle. To put it into perspective, it was enough to buy a house in a nice neighborhood, enough to quit my job and live without ever needing to work again, and still have plenty left over. In 1986, this kind of money wasn't just about luxury, it was life-changing. At first, I didn't know what to do. I was in a daze, staring at the ticket in disbelief. Should I call my friends? Should I go out and celebrate? Should I tell my family? But then I thought about it for a moment longer and decided not to say anything. Not yet. Maybe I was just overwhelmed, or maybe I was afraid of what would happen if I told someone. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how dangerous it could be to reveal this kind of wealth. I knew stories of lottery winners who were taken advantage of, people who had their lives turned upside down by the sudden attention and expectations that came with a fortune. I didn't want that to be me. I wasn't prepared for the kind of life that would come with this win. So, I kept the secret. For the first few weeks, everything seemed normal. I went about my daily routine: work, friends, the occasional trip to the local diner. I was like everyone else, except for one big difference: I had a secret that could change everything. But I wasn't ready to face the consequences of telling anyone. What if they treated me differently? What if they started asking for money? What if they thought I was a fraud or that I didn't deserve it? But the more time went on, the more difficult it became to keep up the facade. Little things started to change. I began noticing that people were treating me differently. At work, I wasn't just a faceless clerk anymore. My colleagues started greeting me with more respect, even flattering me with compliments. I felt the subtle shift in the way people talked to me. At the grocery store, the cashier would give me a little extra attention, and strangers I barely knew would smile at me as if they recognized something in me. It was strange, unsettling. I hadn't done anything to deserve this. I was still the same guy I had been before, but now, it seemed like everyone knew something I didn't. The hardest part came a few weeks later. My best friend, Tony, had always been someone I could count on. He was the kind of guy who didn't ask questions, who just lived in the moment and was loyal to a fault. One evening, we were having a drink at the bar, talking about everything and nothing, when he looked at me and asked, "You've been acting weird lately. Are you okay? You're distant. What's going on with you?" I wanted to tell him. I wanted to confide in him, to share this massive change in my life. But I couldn't. I couldn't risk it. What if he thought I was different? What if he expected things from me that I wasn't prepared to give? What if it all changed, and I lost the friendship that meant more to me than anything else? So I just smiled and brushed it off. But Tony wasn't convinced. He kept pushing, and I could see the suspicion in his eyes. I felt like I was losing him, little by little. But I stayed silent. Over the next few weeks, I noticed a creeping unease growing inside me. My secret had begun to change how I viewed the world. On the one hand, I had an incredible opportunity. The money was mine to do with as I pleased. I could quit my job, buy a new car, travel the world. But on the other hand, I knew that if I revealed it, everything would change. I wouldn't be the same person. People would treat me differently, and I couldn't bear the thought of that. Then came the turning point. One evening, after a long day, I was sitting in my apartment, holding the lottery ticket in my hands. I realized something: I didn't need to tell anyone. I didn't need to buy fancy things or make grand gestures to prove that I was rich. What I needed to do was something more meaningful. Something lasting. I decided to invest the money. I opened a small business, something I had always dreamed about but never had the resources to pursue. I started a modest tech company, specializing in computer parts and accessories. In the mid-1980s, technology was beginning to take off, and computers were just starting to become commonplace in businesses and homes across the United States. It wasn't the easiest thing to do, there was a lot of risk involved, but with the money I had, I could afford to take chances. I didn't tell anyone about the lottery win. I didn't want them to think that's how I had gotten my start. I worked hard, day and night, building the company, researching the industry, finding suppliers. And slowly, things began to pay off. The business grew, and I expanded, moving from a tiny office in my apartment to a real storefront. By the early 1990s, my company was thriving, and I had become a successful entrepreneur. But even as I became wealthy, I kept my secret. I didn't want to flaunt my wealth or let anyone think that's how I had made it. I wanted to be known for my work, not my luck. Looking back now, years later, I realized that keeping the lottery win a secret was the best decision I ever made. It allowed me to build something real, something meaningful. It kept my relationships intact, and it kept me grounded. The money didn't change who I was, it only gave me the tools to change my future. And sometimes, that's the most powerful kind of fortune, not the kind you flaunt, but the kind you quietly use to create a better life for yourself.